Fletcher Dunn was cutting herbs in the kitchen of the house on Queen Anne Hill the night his wife brought her boyfriend home. Not a secret kept in a separate phone, not an affair tucked away in a downtown condo. A boyfriend, introduced by name, with her hand resting on his arm, right there in the foyer of the house Fletcher had painted, repaired, and filled with fresh flowers every single Thursday for 9 years. He heard the front door open. He heard his wife's voice. He heard a man laugh. Not a guest's laugh, not the careful laugh of a colleague meeting the family for the first time. The comfortable, easy laugh of someone who had already been let all the way in. Fletcher set down the knife. He dried his hands on the linen cloth folded over the oven handle. He walked out. Genevieve Dunn stood in the entrance of their home in an ivory suit, dark hair cut sharp at the shoulders, and lit up the way she only got around an audience. She was the chief executive of Stratos Systems, 1,100 employees, a building downtown with her company's name on it, and a husband whose workshop she had been calling the hobby for 9 years. Beside her stood a man in his early 30s in a slim black suit with no tie, the kind of man who looked like he moisturized on a schedule. "Fletcher," she said without flinching. "This is Dean. He runs product for me. I thought it would be good for him to meet everyone before the launch." Fletcher looked at his wife. He looked at Dean. He looked at her hand, which moved just briefly to the small of Dean's back. The way a person touches someone they are still pretending not to belong to. "There is wine on the sideboard," he said. "Help yourselves." He turned around and went back to the kitchen. He did not break. He did not raise his voice. He did not give her the scene she was either dreading or hoping for, and he was never quite sure which. He finished the dinner he had spent the afternoon cooking. Because the ribs were already braised and leaving them would have been a waste, and because some part of him understood even then that the act of feeding people well, even people who did not deserve it, was the thing that still made him feel like himself. He finished the dinner he had spent the afternoon cooking, braised short ribs and the rosemary potatoes Genevieve's investors always complimented, and he poured wine for 8 people, including the man his wife was in love with. At one point, Dean raised his glass and made a small toast to the launch, to the team, and to our incredible hosts. And the table laughed warmly, and Fletcher smiled with everyone else and thought with a strange scientific calm, so this is what it feels like when a life ends politely. An older woman across the table, the wife of an engineer, caught Fletcher's eye across the candles and held it a half-second too long, the way witnesses do. He topped up her glass and asked about her garden. Upstairs, their daughter Willa, 7 years old, slept with a sketchbook open on her chest, because some mercies are small and arrive on time. After the guests left, Genevieve stacked her heels by the stairs and said, "You handled that well." Fletcher looked at her for a long moment. "I know," he said. "If you have ever stayed quiet in a moment when the whole world expected you to shatter, stay with this story until the end. And if you believe quiet, decent people deserve to be seen, hit that subscribe button, because this story is for you." That morning, before any of it, before the dinner party and the boyfriend and the linen cloth, Fletcher had stood in the kitchen at 6:15 making eggs the way Willa liked them, a little burnt at the edges, while she sat on the counter stool drawing in her sketchbook with the focus of a person who took her work seriously. "Dad, the flowers are droopy." "They are not droopy. The left ones are leaning." He looked at the vase on the hall table. She was right. The dahlias had begun to sag. He had bought them the previous Thursday, the way he had bought flowers every Thursday for 9 years, because Genevieve had once said that fresh flowers made a home look successful. He did not know yet that the flowers would become the thing he remembered most clearly about the life he was about to leave. Not the dinner, not the boyfriend, the flowers, and the silence that would follow when he finally stopped buying them. He had not always been the man who served dinner to his wife's boyfriend. Before Genevieve, before Seattle, before the house with the Thursday flowers, Fletcher Dunn had been a craftsman. 12 years in Portland building custom interiors for wooden boats and furniture that people waited a year for, work that lived in the space between engineering and art. The slow, precise, mostly invisible work of joints that would outlast their owners. He had given that up when Stratos offered Genevieve the chief executive track, and the move to Seattle made more sense for her career. He sold his shop to his foreman. He could find something up north, she said. He had always been adaptable. What he found was Willa. Genevieve's travel calendar swallowed 200 days a year, and somebody had to know that Tuesday was library day, that the pediatrician had moved offices, that a 7-year-old who could not sleep would always negotiate for one more chapter. Fletcher became that somebody completely and without resentment, and if you had asked him, he would have told you the truth, that raising Willa was the best work of his life. But the garage held a sealed leather tool roll that had belonged to his wife Ada before it belonged to him, back when Ada was the other woman in this story, the one who came first. Ada had been a boat builder too, the one who taught Fletcher half of what he knew about wood, about joints, about the particular patience required to build something that had to survive water. She had died 4 years before Genevieve, quietly, the way the best people seemed to, and the tool roll had traveled from Portland to Seattle in the bottom of a moving box Fletcher never opened. He had married Genevieve 2 years later, believing, the way widowers sometimes do, that starting over required starting clean. It did not. The tools were still there, waiting beneath the floorboards of the new life, the way roots wait beneath concrete. Some evenings he stood in the garage with his coffee and looked at the box without touching it. The tools inside still smelled faintly of linseed oil, which was Ada's smell, the way certain objects hold a person's presence long after the person has left. Genevieve, when she noticed the garage light at all, would say, "You should really get back to your hobby, honey," in the voice people use for a thing they have already decided is small. Then 3 years into the Seattle life, the discovery happened. Not dramatically. No lightning. On a rainy Tuesday evening, while Genevieve was at a client dinner he had not been invited to, Willa was at the kitchen table drawing, and she slid a page across to him. A chair drawn in careful 7-year-old pencil, with one wide arm like a small table and a seat angled just so. "For reading with your legs up, Dad," she explained. "Seriously, nobody makes chairs for how people actually sit." Fletcher looked at the drawing for a long time. Then he went out to the garage, and for the first time in 3 years, he opened the box. Ada's tools were still wrapped in the same soft cloth. The smell of linseed oil rose out of the leather roll like a voice he had not heard in years. He stood there a moment with a hand plane in his palm and felt something shift behind his ribs. Not grief exactly, but the particular ache of a skill that had been waiting to be used again. He built Willa's chair over 3 weekends out of white oak while she supervised from a stool with the gravity of a foreman. When it was finished, she read in it every single evening, legs up, book on the wide arm, exactly as designed. And something that had been holding still for 3 years began very quietly to move. The next 16 months were the most focused of his life. He woke before Genevieve and worked after Willa slept. He told his wife he had taken on some restoration work for a marina, which was not entirely untrue. There was a marina. There was restoration. There was also Hank Linden. Hank was 70, a retired boatwright with a white beard, canvas suspenders, and a shop on Salmon Bay he refused to sell because, as he put it, the tools would miss him. Fletcher had met him buying sandpaper. Hank looked at the photographs of Willa's chair on Fletcher's phone for a long, silent minute, and then said the sentence that changed the arithmetic of everything. "Son, this is not a hobby. Rent my back corner and stop wasting my time." The first night in that back corner, Hank did not leave him alone to work. He pulled up a stool, lit the terrible pipe his doctor had banned, and watched Fletcher square up a board in silence for 10 minutes. Then he said, "Your hands are angry, son." Fletcher said he was not angry. Hank said, "I did not say you were. Said your hands were, and the wood can hear it. So, whatever it is, you leave it at that door or it ends up in the joints." Fletcher stood there a moment with Ada's hand plane in his grip, the same plane she had used to shape the transom of the last boat she ever built. Then, he told him. All of it. The flowers, the hobby, the closed box, the marriage going quiet around him like a tide going out. The boyfriend he had served dinner to 3 months earlier. The way his wife walked past a lit garage window for 3 years without once turning her head. Hank listened the whole way through without a word. When it was over, he knocked his pipe out against the bench and said the second sentence that changed everything. "Good, now you know what you are building instead." So Fletcher rented the back corner. On the nights Genevieve traveled, which was most nights, he dropped Willa at her friend's 2 doors down or brought her along with her sketchbook, and he built. Reading chairs, a bench with a boat's curve in its back, a kitchen table with joints you could show a museum. He incorporated a small company under a name nobody would notice, and, underneath it, a brand he named on a rainy night with Willa's help: Grain and Compass. The first gallery turned him down in an email 2 sentences long. A design shop said the work was beautiful and the market was dead. Fletcher drove home that night with 3 unsold chairs under a tarp and sat in the garage for an hour. What got him up off the stool was not confidence. It was Willa's chair visible through the kitchen window, occupied, legs up, lamp on. Somebody was already living better because he had built something. The market could take its time. He kept building. A writing desk with a hidden compartment. A kitchen stool designed for a child who wanted to cook beside a parent without being in the way. A rocking chair built from reclaimed dock timber that still smelled faintly of salt water. Each one made with Ada's tools, each one carrying her influence in the curves and the patience, the specific way the wood was allowed to speak before the plane touched it. The turn came at a Saturday Makers' Fair in Ballard, rain drumming the canopy, when a woman stood in front of the reading chair for 10 full minutes, sat in it twice, and handed him a card. She was a buyer for a national home goods chain with 200 stores. "We have been looking for exactly this," she said. "Who are you?" The deal took 5 months. A licensing and production agreement that kept Fletcher's designs his, kept the originals handmade, and put the Willa Redding chair, that was its actual catalog name, into 200 stores. His lawyer Margaret Chen read the final terms twice and looked across the desk. "Mr. Dunn, do you understand what this means for you?" He did not tell Genevieve. He told himself it was because the work was not ready. Underneath that, he knew the harder truth. He had watched his wife for 11 years. She had a gift for taking what other people built and restructuring it until it functioned the way she wanted. He did not want his work restructured. So, he kept it separate. He kept it quiet. He kept it his. There was one night in February when the whole quiet architecture nearly came down. Genevieve came home a day early from Denver at 10:40, and the garage light was on, and Fletcher was inside with the finished prototype of the catalog bench, standing in the middle of the floor like a confession. He heard the town car door. He heard her heels on the walk. The garage side door had no lock, and for 3 long seconds, he simply stood between his work and the house. The heels stopped at the front porch. The front door opened and closed. She had walked past the lit garage window without turning her head, the way she had walked past it for 3 years. Fletcher sat down slowly on a sawhorse and understood that his secret had never actually needed keeping. Her not looking was doing all the work. He had spent 3 years afraid of being discovered, and the truth was simpler and sadder than that. He was not hidden. He was just not seen. 2 small things changed in those months, and Genevieve noticed neither. The light under the garage door burned later, and the Thursday flowers stopped. Fletcher had bought them every Thursday for 9 years, and one Thursday in January he stood in front of the market buckets, dahlias, eucalyptus, the whole wet, bright wall of them, and realized he had been buying flowers for a sentence someone else had said about what a home should look like. He put his wallet away. The hall table stood bare for 8 weeks. His wife walked past it morning and night and never once saw. Willa saw. She did not say anything about it, the way children do not say things they have decided to hold on to until they understand them better. But she noticed. She always noticed. He did not leave that night or that week. People who have not lived inside a long marriage sometimes ask why someone stays after they already know. Fletcher stayed 4 more months. He stayed because he needed to think clearly, and he had always done his best thinking while appearing not to think at all. He stayed because 11 years had taught him that Genevieve responded to stillness the way water responds to pressure, finding every crack, and he needed to know exactly where the cracks were before he moved. He stayed because a chain store contract, a custody arrangement, and a child's school year are things a careful man lines up before he opens any doors. And he stayed because leaving well with a 7-year-old watching is a piece of joinery too, and he intended the joints to hold. Telling Willa happened 2 nights before. The counselor had said choose the place your child feels safest, and there was no contest. They sat on the catalog bench in Hank's shop, the late light coming gold through the west window, and Fletcher explained it the way you explain a repair. Honestly, without blame, in sentences a 7-year-old could stand on. Your mom and I are going to live in 2 houses. None of it is your fault. None of it is a secret you have to carry. Willa was quiet for a long time, her sneakers not reaching the floor. Then she asked the question children always ask, which is never the question adults prepare for. Who gets my chair? You do, Fletcher said. Wherever you are, the chair goes. She nodded slowly, filing it, and leaned her head against his arm. They sat in the sawdust light until the hard part of the silence turned soft. The conversation happened on a Sunday. Genevieve came home from a leadership retreat and found him in the living room in the armchair by the window, the one with the good light. 2 clean, practical bags stood in the hallway, and beside them a purple backpack with a keychain of a cartoon owl. Not dramatic luggage. Luggage that meant a man had thought carefully about what actually mattered and packed exactly that. She stopped in the doorway. What is this? I am leaving, Fletcher said. Willa is at Hank's. She knows. We told her together, me and her, in the way the counselor suggested. And she is okay. You and she will have dinner every Wednesday and every other weekend to start. None of that is a punishment. It is just her school year. I have spoken to a lawyer. I am not interested in a fight, and I am not interested in any of this being ugly. Genevieve sat down across from him. Whatever you think is happening, she said. It is not what you think. Fletcher considered the careful architecture of that sentence. Whatever you think is happening. He thought, not for the first time, that his wife built exits into everything she said the way he built expansion gaps into tabletops. Dean is not the reason I am leaving. He is just the last thing. He paused. You stopped seeing me a long time ago, Genevieve, not because you are cruel, because you decided I was small, and I let you, for a while. But I am not small, and neither is what I have been building. She was quiet for a moment, and then she asked the question he would remember longer than the dinner party itself. Can we keep this quiet until after the launch? She said the board announcement was in 3 weeks, and the timing was. She stopped because she heard it too, a half-second too late. Not are you all right. Not is Willa all right. Not I am sorry. The launch. Fletcher did not get angry, and that was somehow the heaviest thing in the room. He just nodded slowly, the way you nod when a measurement confirms what you already suspected about a warped board. I will be discreet, he said. I have had practice. He picked up the 2 bags and the purple backpack. He walked through the kitchen one last time, not to say goodbye to it exactly, but because he had cooked 4,000 dinners in that room, and he thought he owed it a moment. Then he walked out the front door, and Genevieve Dunn, who commanded 1,100 people, did not find a single sentence to stop him with. He picked up Willa from Hank's. She was sitting on the catalog bench with her sketchbook in her lap, and Hank's terrible pipe smoke still hanging in the air. And when she saw her father's face, she stood up without being asked and took his hand, the way she took his hand when she knew something had cost him more than he was showing. They drove north along the water in the early spring dark, the Sound opening gray and silver on their left. He rolled the window down even though it was cold because he wanted to feel the air. Willa watched the water for a while. Then she said, "Are we going to be okay?" "We already are," he said. "We are just moving where the okay lives." She considered this with the seriousness only a 7-year-old can manage. Can the new place smell like the shop? He laughed for the first time in a week. Kid, I guarantee it. The house he found was small and stubborn. A 1920s craftsman in Ballard, with a detached garage twice the size the house had any right to, which was of course the entire point. The inspector called the garage a liability. Fletcher called it a shop. He and Willa spent their first weekend sweeping it out together. When the light came through the west window at 5 and lit the floating dust like weather, Willa stood in the middle of it and said, "Okay, yeah, this is the place," with the certainty of a person signing off on a blueprint. They built a life the way he built everything else, one true joint at a time. School mornings with the lunchbox assembly line, Willa insisting on packing her own sandwich because she had specific opinions about bread alignment and would not have trusted him with it. The shop after homework. Willa at her corner drafting table, which he had built her, obviously, sketching things nobody made. A bookshelf shaped like a wave, a bed with a reading roof, a bench for 2 people who are having a hard day. Some of her drawings stayed drawings. 2 of them went into the next catalog. The company that had once been a numbered shell with a name nobody knew now had 6 employees, all of them makers Hank had trained or vouched for, and a waiting list that made Margaret Chen laugh out loud when she saw it. Wednesday dinners happened every week without fail. Fletcher drove Willa to the restaurant, and Genevieve was always already there. Always on time now, in a way she had rarely been on time for anything domestic in 11 years. He would watch through the glass for a moment, his daughter talking with her hands, his ex-wife actually listening, and he would drive to the shop and work until pickup. He never once made Willa carry a message between them. Whatever else the marriage had been, the divorce was clean work. He had intended the joints to hold, and they held. Genevieve noticed the company 4 months later, the way powerful people notice things they were never meant to find, sideways through a conversation at a client dinner. Someone mentioned a furniture brand out of Ballard, handmade line, national chain deal, sold out its first run in 11 days. Someone passed a phone across the table, and Genevieve Dunn, mid-sentence about platform integration, looked down at a photograph of her husband standing in a workshop full of gold light and sawdust. Beside him, on a stool, sat Willa, holding up a pencil drawing of a chair. The caption read, "The Willa Reading Chair, designed by a 7-year-old who thinks nobody makes chairs for how people actually sit, and built by her father, who agreed." Genevieve excused herself from the table. She sat in her office the next morning and looked out at Elliott Bay, the same water Fletcher had driven beside on his way out of her life. She thought about the garage, the light under the door, all those evenings, months of it, years of it, and how she had told herself it was a good sign, that he was keeping busy, that he had his little projects. She had never asked what he was building. In 11 years, she had never once opened that door. And the worst part, the part she would carry longest, was that she could not even say he had hidden it from her. He had simply been building it in plain sight, behind a door she had decided was not worth opening. Genevieve Dunn was not a woman who visited her own failures with enthusiasm. She had built a career on moving forward, on restructuring, on finding the opportunity inside every setback. But sitting in that office, she could not locate the opportunity. There was no restructuring available. The brand was his. The designs were his. The company, and the child's drawing at the center of it, and the man who had built all of it in the margins of a marriage where she had stopped looking at him, were entirely, irrevocably his. She sent a message eventually, careful, measured, the way she was careful when the ground had shifted under her. She said she hoped he and Willa were well. She said there were things she wished she had done differently. Fletcher read it once, standing in the doorway of the shop with a chisel in his hand. He wrote back, "I hope you are well too, Genevieve. Wednesday still works for Willa." That was all. The full production agreement, the big one, national placement plus the handmade flagship line, closed on a Thursday in May, 18 months after Fletcher had carried 2 bags and a purple backpack out of the house on Queen Anne Hill. Hank came to the signing in a tie that had last been worn to a boat launching in 1991. Margaret set down her pen when it was done and allowed herself one visible smile. Afterward, the 3 of them, plus Willa in her good overalls, had dinner at a small Italian place near the water. Not a celebration dinner exactly, a quiet one, the kind that is really about something older than the occasion it is marking. "How does it feel?" Hank asked him over the wine. Fletcher thought about it honestly. "Settled," he said. "I feel settled." Hank nodded slowly. "That is a good word." "Took me a while to find it," Fletcher said. "I kept waiting to feel triumphant. Vindicated, one of those." He turned his glass. "But it is not that. It is more like arriving somewhere you were always heading and just did not know it." Hank stole a piece of bread off Willa's plate. She stole it back with a speed that made the old man blink. "Your daughter," Hank said to Fletcher, "has the fastest hands in the Pacific Northwest." Willa said, "Without looking up from her pasta, I learned from the best." And she meant both of them, the living mentor and the dead mother whose tools she had watched her father open 3 years earlier, and everybody at the table understood that. One Saturday in the fall, Genevieve did something she told no one about. She walked into one of those 200 stores and found the display at the front. The oak reading chair with the wide arm and the small printed card beside it that told the story of a 7-year-old designer. She sat down in it, legs up the way the card suggested, in her ivory coat in the middle of a Saturday crowd. A clerk asked if she needed anything. She said, "No, thank you." I was just, and did not finish the sentence. She bought nothing and left. Some realizations do not arrive as lightning. Some arrive as a chair that fits perfectly, built by 2 people you lived with, in a house where you were almost never home. Dean ran product for a rival firm within the year, which surprised no one who had ever watched him smile. Stratos launched its platform, and the launch went fine, and the board announcement went fine, and everything at the top of that tower went fine in the way things go fine when no one is coming home to them. And on a bright Saturday in October, 11 months into the new life, Fletcher and Willa walked the farmer's market in Ballard the way they did most Saturdays, past the honey stand and the terrible banjo player they both secretly loved. Willa stopped in front of the flower buckets. Dahlias, rust and gold and impossible pink, the whole wet bright wall of them. "Can we?" she said. Fletcher stood there for a second in front of the first flowers he had looked at directly in almost 2 years. "Yeah," he said. "Pick the loud ones." They put them in a water glass on the kitchen table because he had not gotten around to building a vase, and they looked ridiculous and perfect. Not for a spouse. Not because anyone had ever said what a home should look like. Just because a man and his daughter wanted flowers on their table in a small house that smelled like coffee and sawdust, where every single object had been chosen or built by people who actually lived there. That evening they walked down to the water. The 2 of them, the sound doing its silver and blue apology for the coming winter. Gulls arguing over the locks, and Willa ran ahead the way kids run when they trust the ground. Fletcher kept an easy pace behind her. He thought about Genevieve briefly, in the abstract way you think about weather in another city. He did not think about it long. There was too much else. There was a bunk bed with a reading roof on the drawing board. There was a school potluck Thursday. There was a company with his daughter's chair in the catalog, and his own name at last above his own door. And on the workbench, laid open where it belonged, was Ada's tool roll. The leather soft with use. The linseed oil smell still faintly there after all these years. Beside it sat a vase Willa had designed that he intended to build that weekend. Sketched on a piece of paper pinned to the wall with a note in her careful handwriting. For the loud flowers, Dad, no more water glasses. He did not look back down the path they had come. That was not stubbornness, it was not bitterness, it was not even a choice exactly by then. It was just the direction he was moving. So let me ask you something tonight. Has someone in your life gone quiet? And have you mistaken that quiet for peace? Have you walked past a door with the light on and never once asked what was being built behind it? Tell me about it in the comments. I read every one. And if this story stayed with you, you know what to do. New stories every week.